Well, hello. You're more than welcome to join me for this week's installment of Penelope's Chinwag. It's a place where I tell you about myself, I tell you about my crafting, tell you about my family, and what's been happening in the last couple of weeks. Well, my mum, who some of you know who've watched the channel and followed my mum, unfortunately, we lost her last year. Um, and what? She used to say, "Wow." And my little circle of friends, if anything happens, that's the first thing we say together. Wow. And that's what I can say this week because it's been amazing. I put my video up last week just as normal. And all of a sudden, people kept watching, subscribing. I've never known anything like it. And I don't really quite know why. Is it different to my other videos? What made it different? Or did YouTube just put it out there and you found it? Whatever the reason, I'm so glad you found it. And I'm so glad that you've joined me. I'm just here, well, because I like sharing. I was a counsellor for the NHS, and I think that's one thing as a counsellor we know that's good for us. Keep things bottled up. Nah, share things. It honestly, it helps so much. And I think for you, YouTube, it is a sharing platform. You know, I'm doing the videos, but you're sharing in my mistakes, my joys, my sadnesses, and it's nice to have that. It's really, really lovely. I said that last week, how much I appreciate you. I can feel it coming again, so take my word for it. Well, I've got a big pile of stuff here to show you. And I want to talk about, first of all, well, do you remember controlling parent? He said that I should or must clear my backlog of crafting stuff. Well, he'll be pleased to know that everything's in order. Everything is tickety boo. You know, if I worked in an office and I had a filing system, I would say the filing's up to date. That means my head's in order. Things have been taken off the bathroom bed because that's where I put them and that's where he told me to get on with them. And they were there in a big pile. They're all sorted now. And it wasn't because of him. It wasn't because he told me in that, you know, should or must voice. That's the voice I bring with me from my childhood. That's the voice that I picked up from, you know, I went to school. When did I go to school? 50, 51, 52. Yeah, 52. I went to school. And, you know, those people had been through the war, those school teachers. It was a different way of teaching them, wasn't it? And I picked up that, well, even when I was 3, I can remember, and I went to this darling little school, and we used to have an afternoon nap. And I can remember laying there and thinking, I must go to sleep. I should go to sleep. This is what we're supposed to be doing. But probably I wanted to be running round. I don't know. But that's what I picked up. And I think we all do. That's why we've all got the controlling parent voice in our head. But how to combat it? Do you know what? I was in bed last night and he came back. Came back. Do you know what he said to me? I know. He said, I don't know why you're putting this video up tomorrow, because when you go on YouTube and look at other people's work, I can tell you it's a lot better than your own. Oh, I thought, he's quite right. Because I was watching a couple of beautiful YouTubes and looking at all their quilts and their knitting and thought, oh, I had a bit of a bad night last night. I've been well, we put the clocks forward, I think, and it's never quite the same, is it? And what with all what's happened in the last few months, I'm having a few restless nights. So that's when he jumped in. He always appears if you're feeling a bit low. So what's the way to combat him? Well, the one we want to listen to, here she is this one. Take care of yourself. Do what you need to do. How are you feeling? I'm feeling a bit unsure of myself. I don't quite know what to do. What would you like to do? Well, I'd like to just carry on as I'd planned. Okay. How would that be? Why don't you try it? Okay, I will. So I access the adult in me, which is the here and now. It doesn't link into any of the former things that we learnt. It's the here and now. How do I feel? What do I want? What do I need? So if we're feeling a bit unsteady, unsure, if you are like me, listen to this nurturing parent, the one that can really help you look after yourself, and then say, an adult, how am I feeling now? What do I want now? What do I need now? And if that's possible, then look after yourself and do that, or think that. Change those thought patterns. I've spoken about a word, neuroplasticity, and it's quite a long word, but I quite like words. And it does mean that these synapses in our head, we can change them. We can redirect them. And that's why I'm saying sharing and is good, because that helps us change these synapses, change our way of thinking. And yeah, sharing helps that, because we're voicing how we're feeling. And if we even voice it to ourselves and ask ourselves the question, we can change those old patterns of thinking. But when we're vulnerable or when we're tired, those old patterns of thinking, they surely do pop back. So he popped back last night and said, I don't think they want to see all that. Well, if you don't, please switch off. That's the adult thing to say, isn't it? Don't stay around if you don't want to. But if you do want to, I'd love it if you did, because I've got a pile of stuff to show you, and I've seen it. It'd be quite nice if I shared it with you. So where shall we start? Well, shall we start with the quilt? Do you remember last week I made that quilt, June Taylor, Stitch and Twist, and I know a few of you asked for the name of it and have sent off for the ruler. I wanted to show you because I went out the other day and I used this bag. It popped it over my shoulder and I thought, that's the smallest Stitch and Twist, the 3-inch. And it's so quick. You just sew squares together, chop them up with the ruler, re-sew them, put a bit round, and there you've got a nice bag. So I wanted to show you that. That's the smallest Stitch and Twist. But, because I made the mistake, I had some fabric left over. And so I've made Nicola, here it is, a quilt for Tommy's bed when he comes to stay with her. And I did a little bit of video whilst I was making this. So if you are a very good, if you don't want to watch me doing quilts, then fast forward underneath and then you can just see the real thing. But if you fancy doing that because you're a beginner or you're wanting to learn, or there's a few tips along the way that I show you, join me. This is the quilt I'm doing for Nicola, and now I've lost the bits. Oh no, here they are in front of me. Okay. I'm using this King Tut colour 969 because it just blends in, as you can see, and I'm doing in the ditch. I'm going again off what I usually do on my quilts. I would have done, lots of quilting designs on here, but I just don't want to with this fabric. With each square I've sewn on, I've stripped it, what we call stripping it. So here I stripped it, and then I stripped the other side, and then I carried on across. Then I cut myself right. So I just wanted to say a little tip if you're thinking of doing this. Don't just put your fabric like that and sew along and then cut it off. It's very tempting to do that. But you see, this fabric can stretch. Well, now that's only got to stretch tiny, tiny bit, this tiny, tiny bit, and by the time you get to the end, so my recommendation is measure that bit. Let's put it on here. Measure it. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5. And now you're going to, it's not, if it stretches, then you're going to make it fit because they're both 7.5. You won't have the bit of fabric to let it stretch to. Are you getting my meaning? Make it right. Don't just sew it together and cut off and hope it for the best, because this bit can stretch. So that's just a tip I give you if you're fancy doing a plain and simple quilt with squares. How simple is that? I put a piece there, I made my line across, cornerstone on the edge there, but then a strip going across. And that, of course, as I say, that strip was measured. You know how big this is, and this is going to be 2 inches, this is going to be 7 inches, so 7, 8, 9. Add it up, cut your piece of fabric the right length and sew it. Don't just sew along, because you will find the whole thing goes off kilter. So I am just stitching in the ditch, and I've stitched in this stitch what we call just along. You won't see the stitches, it's just holding it down. I'm going to be stitching in the ditch all the way round. I've decided to cut off the little bits that I had, 2.5 inches, and I've sewn them together. Press the seam open and in half, and then I'm going to trim this quilt. I'll sew that along, and that will be my binding. And here we are, all finished. So each square is quilted round the edge. That's about as much as you want to leave on a quilt, a hand. This is what the binding looks like. I like the fact that it's all the different pieces. I think it looks effective. As I say, I did it 2.5 inches, and then I've got a nice bit to sew on the back. Makes it, that's how I wanted it. So I'm going to do the label. What label shall I thought? And I just pondered, and what came to my mind was this book. As you can see, it's very old. It was my girls when they were little girls. And we used to read it all the time. Good night, little one. Good night, little one. Day is done. Good night, little two. Peekaboo. And they just loved it. We used to read it. You know what it's like with children, reading over and over. Good night, little three. Just like me. Oh, there she is, look, in the cupboard. You have to find them. There's 2, but there's the 3rd one. Oh, she's under the bed there. And so what I've done is I've used this DMC magic paper. I've traced it onto the rough side from the book. I'm hoping it works. We shall see. You peel off the paper backing, Just iron my piece of fabric. I'm going to put that in the middle. That worked well because this was warm, so it sort of stuck there nicely. Not too hot. Yeah, you don't want that too hot. There it is. I'm going to stitch that over. What colours shall I use? I've got the feeling of blue. Use the all-coloured blue. Well, we'll see what we can do. I was just going to do the outline, but we'll see what we can do. And I'll show you that when it's finished. I shall put that in my hoop and have a go. It's the label. Good night, little one. Nanny Pene, March 2024. Okay, I'll be back. It's all come and go, isn't it, with this video? And so here it is. I'm really pleased with it. I think she's going to be 2. It's 4 across and 6 down. So it's a good size. I'll put the size on the screen. I'm not quite sure what it is. I'll have to measure it. It's plain and simple, if you like, but I think it's very effective. But there it is. And the backing's lovely with the quilting, and I'm thrilled to bits with the label. You saw me do the label and it's come out lovely. I just got a little colouring pencil that's got a felt tip on the end, you know, and just coloured in his little outfit. She's going to be thrilled with that. Okay, I better get on, otherwise we'll be here all day. That would be nice, wouldn't it? So the next thing to show you is the quilt as you go. I've learned a few bits about that too. I've got it here. Shall I put that bit of video up? It's only short, and then we'll have a little chat about that. So you've seen me do my quilt as you go, and I wondered what I was going to do with them. And they're on my table, and I was going to make a tablecloth, but it might become a tablecloth. On the other hand, it might become a quilt. And when you have a quilt, well, I've got one here. Hang on, I'll show you. Here's a quilt. It was just on my chair. Here I've got lots of joins. I've done flying geese, small flying geese. What else have I got? Oh, I've got squares. Tiny. Can you see that? Little hexagons. They're so small, look. Anyway, I think you've seen this before. It's not about this quilt. I love doing French knots, and I did, I just made that up. Oh, yes, they're French knots. Lots of French knots. They're beautiful, aren't they? And satin stitch here. I enjoyed making that. Anyway, it's not about that. It's about the back being smooth. I've got my fold over bits on the front, but I want my back to be smooth. And the way to get a smooth back, I just thought I'd show you, in case you're thinking of doing it. I do a couple of knots because I want that really secure. I'm going to take a stitch along there. Can you see? I'm not doing that It's not that movement. That's how you put EPP together. This is taking the, in your case, front one, my case, the back. And then I make a ladder, I go across, and I take a little stitch along there. You don't have to pull it tight. I make a ladder, so I go back, and just that little running stitch along there. I leave that, you can leave that quite loose. Come across and make the ladder. And do your little running stitch. Just showing you it's loose there. Make your ladder and do your running stitch. So you do that together. Make your ladder and do your running stitch. Yeah? I needed to know really that that's in exactly the right spot. I need some clips, but they're over there. So I'm just going to pin that there together because we want to get this just right. Okay. Of course, you can manipulate fabric. It's not like pieces of cardboard. So I'm going to go across and do my little running stitch. Come across and do my running stitch. You can do them a lot smaller and a lot closer together if you want. I tend to. I enjoy doing small stitches because then it really does join it up so well. Now let's just stop for a minute and just pull that. And you can see as I pull it how that tightens up. That's really nice and tight. Let's go along to the middle here. So I'm in this side. I'm going to make a ladder and go across. A ladder and go across. Now I'm going to pull those stitches so they're lovely and taut. Oh, I can feel that go right the way along. It ran so smoothly. And now I'm going to do a little knot. I did show you this in my other video, but it was just because I'm doing this today and I thought, oh, you might like to see because something's happened. Right, there we are. So when I show you the wrong side, it's as flat as a daisy. Let me just cut this off. It's completely flat. Completely flat. Which is what the back side of a quilt would be. The back of a quilt would be completely flat. So in a way, this is really quilt as you go, isn't it? You can pull that really quite tight. See, you see, this is going to fit beautifully. Can you see that? It's just going to fit beautifully. But I recommend when you do your pieces, I was doing these while Pete was in hospital and I was all over the shop. And can you see here, I've got to here sewing this together and this is completely wrong. That's a bit too big there. So I'm going to undo those bits. It's worth it for me. This has gone together lovely. Won't take me a minute just to undo that couple of seams, get this exactly right, and then I will find that that will join beautifully and that will be sitting right. So I just made a little slip up with this one. And if I've drawn that now on the back, I've moved that to the front and I'm going to now sew that properly on the front. And so there we are. It fits perfectly. It fits flat. And what it was cut on the bias and it had just grown a little bit. So here it is. And again, I'm really pleased with it. What I've learnt is that working with different thicknesses of the cotton on these quilts as you go is, I think it's a good thing if you can get equal weights going from, say, Liberty Tana Lawn, which this one is Liberty Tana Lawn, and then this one next to it is a thicker one. It's okay, but I think it would be best if it was more or less the same, weight of fabric. I'm really pleased with it. I'm sitting here with it over me. I can really see it as a quilt. I was so unsure about it being a quilt. That's why I put it on the table. But it's absolutely fine. And I know it's staying on the table whilst I add to it. But that's my work in progress that doesn't ever need to end. Because I should just carry on until it's as big as I want it. And let's face it, wherever I stop, it's complete. I haven't got something that's folded up, waiting to be backed and waiting to be quilted. So there we are. I can highly recommend the Quilt As You Go. If you're quilting as you go and you've just done a piece this big, why not do another piece that big and sew it together and just see how it works out? So that's enough of that. Another few tips. So what's next? Well, it's been me chatting, hasn't it? So shall I put up Pete's bit, Desert Island Discs? So what record would you like to choose for your third one?
Runaway by Shannon.
Runaway.
That's it.
Run.
Runaway.
Ah, righty-ho.
Yeah.
He's from the US of A.
He is.
And I did look up where he's from and I've forgotten it.
Oh, never mind.
I think it's somewhere like Michigan. 1961, I think, wasn't
61.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, I was 16, I think, yeah.
Right. And what made you love it? Where were you?
We were at the Isle of Wight and Shanklin Isle of Wight, and it had a pier, and at the end of the pier it had a dance hall.
Yeah.
And that was being played a lot. And whenever I hear it, I'm there.
You're straight back to Shanklin Pier.
Straight back to Shanklin. Well, to Shanklin first.
Shanklin.
Because I stayed there quite a long time.
Yeah, but what were you doing in Shanklin?
Well, me and my mate Tom, who I palled up with when I first went to Hendon Tech, we decided we'd like to go to Shanklin, the Isle of Wight.
Did you decide together? I mean,
yeah. Well, I'd been with Mum as a kid.
Oh, had you? So you
we went to Rye.
Right.
Is it Rye or Ride? Ride.
Right, yeah.
Because Mum's friend had a house left to her.
Yeah. I remember seeing photos of you with your mum and Auntie Rose knitting on the ferry. That's it, isn't it? Yeah. So you decided to go to Shanklin?
Shanklin. Yeah, we got a job at not the High Park Hotel, I always say that. The Channel View Hotel.
Channel View, yeah.
For 4 weeks.
Yeah.
That's where we met a chap called Tim or Jim. Nobody knew. Some people called him Tim, some people called him Jim, but he answered to both.
He was Irish, wasn't he?
He was an Irish fella, yeah. Well, he was older. I think he was quite a bit older than us. He'd been around. And he was the pot man in the island.
Oh, he worked in the hotel?
Yeah, he worked in the hotel. The day we got there, he was the first one to knock on the door. And he said, I'll take you out and I'll take you down and meet a few people. And, and that's what we did.
He made your year, didn't he?
He made a couple of years, actually.
Did he?
Yeah.
Because you kept going back for a couple more years after, didn't you?
Yeah.
But this particular year, who did he introduce you to then?
Well, first of all, he introduced us to Daredevil Les.
We'll talk about him later.
The highball diver.
Yeah. So there you are, at the end of the pier on Shanklin, listening to Shannon singing Runaway, and it's such a memory for you.
Yeah. Wherever we went with Tim, he introduced us to people, and they were all people that worked in places where they could give you freebies. Yeah. And so it was all going on.
But he introduced you to somebody else, which in episode 10, we had a little chat about. Actually, it was your first chat that you did on this channel. And Penelope's Chinwag, and Daredevil Les. So I'm just going to put that bit in now, save you saying it all again.
Thank you.
And then we'll come back.
Yeah. Himself, and now there's a story about him. His name was either Tim or Jim, and he took us to the pier.
So who did you meet at the pier?
Well, he introduced us to a lot of people, but the bloke who really stood out was a man called Daredevil Les.
Daredevil Les.
He was a character, and he lived under the pier.
Under the pier.
Right at the end, where the dance hall was, underneath you could get down on it was like a little walkway, and there were like a little cabin or two where they stored stuff. But he had one, and Tim took us in, and
what was that like?
Well, it was just a bed in the corner, and big sea chests all round the wall.
Sea chests.
And there was this bloke who had a hook nose, and the place stunk of booze. And we were introduced, and Tim said, "When are you going to do your act?" And Daredevil Les said, "I'll be up in a minute. Go and get the crowd." And Tom and I looked at each other and thought, what's going on here? So anyway, we all trooped up to the pier, and Tim started walking around on his hands and doing tumbles, and by this time he had a costume on.
What sort of costume?
Well, it was an ordinary costume then, but when I say ordinary, it was like a strongman's. It wasn't quite so.
What, black?
It was black with Bovril written on it.
Bovril? Yeah. Oh, just ordinary, like just you ordinary, see. Yeah. I often saw people with Bovril costumes on. Just ordinary.
No, well, it was almost like ones Mum used to knit. Oh. And then he went on the diving board.
And there was a diving board on the pier?
Yeah, and it went up. It was 3 levels. Anyway, Tim went off the first one, and he did a somersault, beautiful somersault, went diving, and he came up, and then he went to the second one. And he did a backward. I can't remember, but he really,
impressive.
He could dive, And anyway, by this time, Daredevil Les had come up. Well, the other thing I didn't tell you, only had one hand.
One hand?
Only had one hand. He'd lost a hand.
Right.
And the hand was wrapped with a red bandage, and he used to hold it above his head. And as he walked round the pier, saying, "I'm going to do my Daredevil dive. I'm going off the highest dive board in the country," and all that. And anyway, he started climbing up, because you can imagine he's got one hand. He's climbing up the ladder. So
yeah, and he's a bit worse for wear.
He's very worse for wear.
Yeah.
And because Tim had done all these brilliant dives, and everybody had clapped and cheered. And then he got to the top, and we looked up, and it was quite high. And then we looked down at the sea, and that was a long way down. Tom said, "Oh, blow me, I don't fancy that." I said, "Oh, no, nor do I. Let's see how he does."
Yeah.
Anyway, he lurched from side to side on the top diving board, and everybody thought, they were all going, "Oh," because it looked like he was going to fall off the side before he even got there. Anyway, he got to the end, and he held his hand up and he said, "Are you ready?" And everybody went, "Yes." "Are you ready?" "Yeah." It was quite a crowd by this time, all went round the pit. And
never seen anything like
And then he just fell off the end.
Oh no.
He just, a great huge splash at the wall. Everybody cheered. Well, didn't cheer at first because he went under, and we thought, is he going to come up? And as soon as he broke, his arm came up first, the one without the hand.
What a way to earn your living.
And a great cheer went up.
So there, you were introduced to quite a fellow, weren't you?
Oh, yeah. He was great.
I've looked him up.
Yeah.
And on Wikipedia, his dad was on Wikipedia, and his dad was called Frank Callandine Gatsby. And when he was 4, he lost his leg. due to something wrong with his hip.
Yeah.
And that didn't deter him. He learnt to swim, and he was taught by Professor somebody or other, who also taught King George V.
Oh.
And Gadsby actually performed his high diving routine in front of the king, and he dived off Skednef Pier several thousand times. He rescued a lot of people from the sea because he was such a strong swimmer. He once dived from a plane with a parachute. I mean, he was notorious. He really was. And of course, this guy that you met, Daredevil Les, he performed with his dad. Yeah. And when he was 4, like you said, he lost part of his arm, his hand. His dad used to dive from a 60-foot tower into a tank from Skegness, which was 16 foot in diameter. There was only 5 foot of water in it, and he set it alight. I mean, it's just amazing. Quite a character, and he's in the history books anyway. And you were one of his mermaids. I think. Tell me about being one of his mermaids.
Oh, crumbs! Well, Tim.
Yeah.
Yeah. He introduced us that time.
Yeah, we've done that.
And then after a while, we decided we'd help him out, get a bigger crowd.
Okay.
So we dressed up with hats on, and we had the Oxo thing and all that. And we also put cloaks on, and we went round and round when we went up the top. We went running round, so Tim was doing his, we come and see Daredevil Les, and then just before he would die, we all jumped in the sea. We had all this clothes on. Well,
they weighed you down?
Well, it was wool.
Yeah.
It was all wool.
And a cloak.
And there we were, the wool got heavy, and then we all got back alive.
Obviously.
So that's all right. But
did you do the jumps again? Or?
We did the jumps again.
But not with the cloaks.
Not with the cloaks, and we was not... we just mucked about and just didn't do anything really. Just made a splash.
Well, I think we could sit here and chat a long time about the Isle of Wight, but getting back, I will let you have Dale Shannon Runaway, because I too like the record, and I think it does make you think of lovely sunny days. Okay. So see you next time then.
Bye-bye.
So that was his third record, Dale Shannon, Runaway. Do you know that one? Okay, so I'm going to show you some things that I've finished because, I am very organised. I had a pattern I showed you and I made it. It's ever so cute. It's really cute. I'm so pleased with it. So pleased with it. I bought it from Lisa at Rose Garden Patchwork, where I get my supplies from for my macarons. And this is the sewing. I put all my I've got everything in there that I need for when I make my diary. I've never kept a diary. I would have stopped a diary by now. I know I would. I have got great intentions, by the end of January I'm petering out, but with the fabric one that I'm doing, I haven't petered out and I'm doing it. So that's got all my little, bits in that I need just for doing that. I'm going to make several more of these because it's just a pattern. Once you know how to do it, there's, I would say, half on the machine. But you can do it by hand. I quilted it on the machine, but you can quilt that by hand. Certainly can. But I'm going to use some stash and make some more. I think they make lovely presents, and you get a nice amount in it. And detailed instructions. So that's done. I'm very pleased to have got that done. Do you remember I had the green nanny? I had the green, my great-granddaughter says that, if you're new, you'll think I've gone nuts, but as she was growing up, she always said that, and the viewers know that I always have to say green nanny, but I can cut that bit out, otherwise you might think I've gone a bit loopy. But I had a hood on that. Do you remember? I've done it. It's all done. I'm going to be wearing that. And yeah, it's good. Of course, I needed an extra button because I did. And I didn't have an extra button of the ones that I had. So my nan, in the 80s, she knitted my dad a cardigan. And my mum held on to it. We sorted all through dad's stuff, but that cardigan she couldn't let go of. And I had to let go of it, but I cut the buttons off. And so I put the buttons on this jacket. And Pete says they look all right. I think they do. And so I'm rather pleased to think that, my nan had sewed those on for my dad's jacket, and now here I am wearing it. So that's that job done. And I've made a habitation throw. I sent off, Anne of Spar Knits, she was having a de-stash. I bought 6 of these, all different colours, but they were all of the same, ilk. Hand-dyed yarn, Telling Yarns, spun at John Arben. And when you look him up, Telling Yarns, it's a lovely story. Farmer, and John Arben spins it for him. And so I've got this one left over. I'm going to make Pete a hat with that. And I've got this much left over. And the rest of it has gone into a habitation throw. Let me put that there. Well, it's absolutely gorgeous. It feels so beautiful. And you see the colours melding into each other. Pop it up close. Oh, that blue, it's my favourite. If I could buy another few skeins of that, I would. The colours in that. And I'm not a great one that likes speckles. Well, I don't like speckles at all, actually. And there's not a speckle in this. It's just beautifully blended. And so this is really large. You can see. I mean, that's down on the settee now. And you can fully envelop yourself in it. I love it. So that was a joy. Knitting a habitation throw is a real... I don't have to think about it. In fact, I felt quite sad when I cast off the last stitch. Pete and I did get out for a walk. He's able to walk a lot better than he has been able to. So the little film is about that. But before that, I just want to chat about my plans. I can't go on too long. Well, perhaps I haven't got time this week. Shall I make it next week? Otherwise, it's going to be a long episode. I'll do that. But I'll give you a hint. I got this book, Cloth Stories, Ali Ferguson. It just came up in my feed. You know how things do. It's a textile artist's guide to taking inspiration from domestic life, family stories, and the objects that surround and comfort us. Pair glorious vintage fabric with keepsakes and ephemera to create exquisite personal and meaningful textile work. Beautifully illustrated, and it is. And of course, it's given me the idea for what I want to do with all my stuff. In 2013, I wrote my story. Oh dear, and I put photos with it, and yeah. Shall I start off? Shall I just read you the very beginning of it? And that'll give you a flavour. And then I'm going to read you a bit each week. And I'm going to have the goal of turning that into a fabric, whatever she said, fabric, What did she say? Fabric keepsake. Meaningful textile work. Well, of course, he came up and said, "You won't be able to do that. That's far too hard for you. You're not that kind of person. You like a pattern." Well, it's true, I do like a pattern, but, I'm going to have a go. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. I haven't lost anything, have I? I'm just going to read you the first little bit of my book, and then we'll start next week. My friend Sonia had recently qualified as a counsellor and attended a seminar where she was taught to use buttons in symbol work to help people see themselves and their circumstances more clearly. It was a technique that I found very helpful in my own work when I too qualified as a counsellor, working for the NHS for some 18 years until my retirement in 2020, just as it happened at the beginning of lockdown. Sonia and I, over the years, had done a lot together, learning to spin and dye our wool, to do counted cross-stitch, knitting and embroidery. We became friends in London, and after moving to opposite ends of the country, corresponded with each other regularly. She had come to stay for a few days on holiday, and as usual, I wanted her to share with me what she'd learned. On the table was a jar of buttons, which she tipped out and began arranging. I looked up and down the rows and saw amongst others a small black button, a large red button, a blue plastic one, different size brown leather ones that would suit an Aran cardigan or tweed jacket, in fact just an ordinary mixed variety, such as many people have at home. I've always liked buttons and enjoyed looking at the assortment in front of me. I wondered what was coming next. She asked me to choose one that represented me. I quickly and instinctively chose the square mother-of-pearl button with cut-off corners. This was me, aged about 10 years old. I was shiny in many different ways. I felt a bit special. I enjoyed life and was happy, I said, turning the button between my fingers. I felt quite amazed that I was able to relate to a button. And when Sonia asked if there was anything else, I found myself adding, "Yes, it's the shape of it. I was having the corners knocked off me." I was surprised by what I was saying, and I also found myself feeling a little angry. This started me thinking, had I felt pressured by others? What had happened to me, the real me, as I'd grown? I decided to write about my life to see if I could find out. Where better to start than at the beginning? My childhood was quite ordinary, nothing special, I want to say, but of course, on reflection, it was quite special. I was loved by a mum and dad who were doing their best to make life comfortable for me and who wanted to give me the best opportunities life could give. The war had finished 4 years earlier, sweet rationing was abolished in April, and although there was still food rationing, things were beginning to settle down and hopes were high. I love bright days and sunshine, and it was just that kind of day when I was born. So I thought I'd read you the next bit, and I'm going to try and translate that and make it into a fabric. Well, you can see I can't think of the word because I'm not quite sure how I'm going to be doing it. A personal and meaningful textile work. Watch this space. So I really must go now. You haven't got any more time to listen to me, I'm sure. Thank you so much for joining me. Do take care. And I'll just put a little film up of our walk. See you soon. Bye-bye.
There's a new day that will come again tomorrow. There's a new day to wash away the pain. There's a new day to take away your sorrow.